Welcome to Money Talks. I'm Genevieve Westcott with the latest financial news from the rural heartland here at home and around the world. In this edition, the IMF's top man is now a top prisoner, sitting in a New York jail awaiting a court hearing after a hotel maid accuses him of attempted rape. What are the implications for sorting out the global financial crisis? Betting on the budget. The markets are jittery as they ponder John Key's plan to save the New Zealand economy when he announces his budget on Thursday. What's up for grabs? And dairy giant Fonterra and its farmer shareholders are on track to report record production 2 weeks out from the close of the 2010-11 season. All this and much, much more coming up. Joining us now to tell us the very latest in the world of dairy with the overnight results from the global dairy trade auction is ASB rural economist James Shortall. James, great to see you.
Good to be here.
How did the prices do overnight?
Well, prices fell slightly, down about just over 1%, but nothing to get too worried about it. I don't think. We've been bobbing around a little bit over the past couple of months, but the fact that they're still very high is great news. Yeah,
they still remain at historical highs, but there is a slight trend downwards.
Yeah, there has. Well, they have fallen a little bit over the past couple of months. So I wouldn't be surprised to see some further falls, to be honest, as we start to get into really the thick of it in terms of the northern hemisphere, which we really are getting into right now. So their production season's going well, and that could have some implications for prices.
Now, big news out of California. California Dairies looks like it's set to join in on the auction platform. What can you tell us?
Well, I mean, I think that they took a bit of criticism in terms of Fonterra and with global dairy trade early on, and a lot of the big players didn't like it, but now they see it's a pretty transparent form of selling product and being able to set their product for a lot of other prices around the world. So, I wouldn't be surprised to see other manufacturers and processors potentially putting their products on there, and we're starting to see that happen.
They're not going to compete on whole milk powder, are they? That's really not where they're at. Tell us more about the company. How big is it?
Well, to be honest, I mean, there's plenty of dairy companies in the US, and they're of some fairly substantial size, but they have actually been sort of more focused on the internal domestic US production, and they also have different product mixes to what we have here in New Zealand. So they could be slightly at a slightly different angle to what the products we have here from Fonterra and what we're competing with.
Yeah, and California Dairies handles what, something like 9% of the total milk production in the States. This is no mean feat.
That's right. I mean and California is probably one of the fastest growing areas for milk production in the US. They've got some of the larger herds, so there's potential that they will grow even bigger in terms of domestic, but also in terms of export product.
Yeah, their revenues hit $5 billion this year alone. I mean, is there any end in sight for them?
Well, I mean, when there's still much more scale to go, plus geographically they're fairly well located to the developing countries across Asia, that sort of thing. So there is potential for exports, and that's what we have been seeing out of the US market probably over the past 6 to 9 months, particularly, that they have been exporting more product because their production has been going well, and domestic consumption in the US has been pretty soft, to be honest.
Yeah, and meantime, here at home, it looks like our dairy farmers are going to have a record season in terms of production. Tell me more.
Well, to be honest, we had a pretty slow start to the season. We had a lot of issues. We had a storm. We've had dry periods right through till Christmas. But since that time, then there's been a lot of areas that have actually done particularly well, and they've actually been able to stretch through the end of the season relatively well. So I think it has been a great season for a lot of farmers, and this is going to be in particular areas, and a lot of them are going to be enjoying very good payouts, both because they're getting high prices in terms of payout, but also they're getting pretty good production off their farms.
Now, how's the New Zealand dollar hanging? What's going on there, James?
Well, we've softened, we've softened quite remarkably, and I think that is a reflection of what has been happening in the global markets over the past couple of weeks. Global markets, past 2 weeks out of the US, then they've actually decreased, and there's been concerns, of course, out of Europe, out of the US, a slowdown on the global economic front. So, we have seen the dollar drop back, and we've been trading under 79 cents, which has been a low level for the past couple of weeks in terms of the Kiwi dollar against the US.
Last week when I left you were going to keep an eye on the flooding of the Mississippi River, something close to your heart. You went to school near there in your university days. I see now that authorities have opened something like 5 of the 125 gates. 3 million acres of farmland have already been flooded. What are the implications there?
Well, I think it's going to be quite severe for some parts of Louisiana, Mississippi, that sort of thing. And some of these areas, they haven't been opened up since sort of in the 70s in some cases because they haven't been used. So, this has quite a big effect on those agricultural areas. But I mean, it's necessary. It has to happen. The reason they've been doing it is to try and avoid another Katrina catastrophe, I guess, for New Orleans. So, it has to happen.
Yeah, but meantime in Louisiana already something like $300 million worth of farmland gone, sitting underwater. We're talking what? Corn, wheat, cotton?
Cotton's going to be the major one, I think, that's going to be affected. But we haven't really seen a big change in prices just yet. So that's going to be interesting to see how that unfolds. But also what the long-term implications is for that particular part of those land, the areas, and what that's going to mean for them over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, I guess.
Okay, keep us up to date. Thanks, James. Coming up after the break, drowning in debt. What's a government to do? John Key unveils his master plan as we nervously await his latest budget on Thursday. What can we expect? Europe's finance ministers rally round as Portugal gets its own bailout package. And which is worse? With both European and U.S. debt issues looming large, market volatility is increasing while commodities remain under pressure. It's all ahead. But first, answer this in our Farmers' Facts and Figures quiz. According to the latest food price report, what percentage did the price of fresh milk rise in the 12 months to April? Find out when we return. Stay with us. Welcome back to Money Talks. Just before the break, we asked you, what percentage did the price of fresh milk rise in the 12 months to April? The answer, fresh milk rose 9.3% in price. Now let's bash the budget. Finance Minister Bill English insists he'll get the government's books back into surplus, increase national savings, and reduce the vulnerability associated with New Zealand's high external debt. Joining us now is Senior Financial Advisor for Spicer's, Jeff Matthews. And Jeff, what's the government going to do tomorrow at the budget? What's your best call?
Well, they've pretty much told you the things that they're going to start looking at. KiwiSaver, working for families, student loans, all the three of the programs that were brought in the previous regime when the economy looked a lot different, and we can't keep racking up the kind of deficits that we are each week, and so it's some of those will have a bit of a haircut, some of those programs.
Yeah, but nothing radical.
No, I don't think so. I mean, there's an election coming up in November, so they won't want to be too draconian in this budget, but maybe some tougher decisions have to be made further down the track. I mean, the problem is in this current cycle is that even though we've come out of recession, it hasn't been as strong a recovery as you'd normally expect, and so you've got perhaps more people on benefits, less tax revenue coming through, which making the numbers look worse.
Mm-hmm. And the thing is that the government is saying we'll be back in surplus by 2015-16. James, sounds like a pipe dream to me. What do you reckon?
Well, I think it's going to be quite difficult, and probably to achieve that, there's going to have to be a bit of pain and probably some quite big decisions made, potentially asset sales of some of the state-owned assets in order to, fund some of the infrastructure spend that they're potentially going to be looking at over the next few years. So there's going to have to be some quite big calls in order to achieve that, but that's going to be a tough ask. I guess 4 years to achieve that's going to be big.
The tax cuts they made aren't really working, are they, Jeff? I mean, here they thought people would be going out with the extra money, spending up large. It just ain't happening, and no sign it's going to change.
Well, if you look at that previous 10-year period, where mortgage debt went from kind of 50 billion to 160 billion, I mean, it's a bit like you see those, alligators who swallow a pig. I mean, they've got this thing going through the system, and we've got this huge amount of debt that accumulated in the previous 10 years. So given market uncertainty, almost the best investment you can make at the moment is repay debt.
Is there anything in the rural economy that the boys and girls at home should be watching out for tomorrow?
We're facing quite a different budget this year to what we were last year. Last year, the economy was probably looking quite different, and the government were we're actually making some quite structural changes to how the tax system would work to make sure that we're going to save more and potentially tax people that are going to be spending. So that was going to be quite favourable for the economy going further ahead. And they're also going to look at things like, for the agricultural sector, trying to provide more money to innovation for research projects and really trying to increase the value of the whole pie, or make a bigger pie, I guess. But this year, we don't have that luxury. This year, we're going to have to cut back, and I'm not expecting to see any major investments into the agricultural sector like we have seen perhaps over the last 1 to 2 years.
Will you be sitting in the lockup for the budget tomorrow?
No, I won't be sitting there. I'll be reading reading the news reports like everyone else.
All right. Somebody else who won't be in the lockup, but is in his own kind of lockup, of course, is the top boy for the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, picked up for alleged attempted rape of a hotel maid at a $3,000 a night suite in Manhattan. This raises serious implications for the IMF, doesn't it, Jeff?
Well, it does. I mean, it's alleged at this stage. So, I mean, the French are saying it's a bit of a sting operation. He's been set up. The truth will come out over time. One of the things is he's been heavily involved in restructuring and, Greek debt and also Portuguese debt and getting through the financial crisis. So, to kind of lose your general, at a critical time is not good. I mean, there's enough other people in there, but it is a bit like losing the general at the front.
The problem is his 2IC, John Lipsky, who is a former Wall Street economist, he's already said prior to this arrest that he was out by August. So the two top guys at the IMF are now out for the count, it appears. And I understand that developing countries are now saying, hey, my hand's up, it's our turn to run the IMF. What would you think of that, James?
Well, perhaps 5 years ago, when really the IMF was concentrating on developing countries, how they could facilitate more development in those countries. But now the biggest issues are, sustainability of developed economies and in Europe and the US, and that's really where they're focused. So I think the imperative right now would be to ensure that continues to occur, which we are seeing some of it, but there's potential for it to derail, because the IMF's really been an arbitrator, I guess, in making sure that the Europeans can agree on a bailout package for Ireland or for Greece or for Portugal, all these sorts of things. So I think that's going to be integral going forward.
It's interesting because, as I understand it, the IMF is typically run by a European.
And the World Bank's usually by an American.
By an American. Tell me more.
Well, it's just one of those things that's been set up years ago. And, I mean, what you want really are the best people in there. If it's an Australian or it's somebody from Hong Kong, I mean, do we really care? But it's just been this kind of duopoly that goes along where, Europe gets the IMF job and an American or somebody similar gets the World Bank job. I mean, those things were set up years ago. It's time to move on and try and get the best possible people in those jobs.
I wonder what he's thinking, sitting in that Rikers jail cell. And I'll tell you what, the prison in Rikers Island, I visited there, and it is not a place you'd want to be. They have all the heavy-duty crims in there.
But he's in a single cell, so he's...
He is, normally where they put guys with contagious diseases. So watch this space. We'll see what happens. Well, meantime, all this happened just 2 days before the IMF gave the go-ahead for Ireland to get, another $2.8 billion
a little bit of a top-up.
Yeah, a little bit of a top-up. How's that going?
Ireland's not the problem at the moment. I mean, Greece is back on as the problem. I mean, it's a year ago we talked about Greece, and with the IMF and European Central Bank, basically what they were able to do was put together a bridging finance to kind of get Greece through the crises, providing that they do a whole lot of draconian measures on cutting pensions and tidying up their economy. A year ago, the 10-year bond yield in Greece was about 12%. It's now 15%. So the market is saying Greece is probably going to have to default on their bonds. I mean, even though you've rolled over the loans, you've given them this bridging finance, they're carrying too much debt, it's too expensive, and it's unsustainable. And so the markets are starting to price in a default of some description.
Another interesting thing that I read was that there was a German leak from the meeting of the European finance ministers recently, suggesting that the Eurozone as it exists may not exist 12 months from now. Germany seems to have lost the taste for bailing out all of its poorer neighbours. What do you think of that, James?
Well, there's been talk about this for quite a while, probably for 12 months now, where you've got the northern European countries, the
haves, if you like.
That's right, that have been doing well, and probably are the ones that really drive the value of the euro and have been doing quite well, to be honest, over the past 12 months. But then you've got the other countries, the Spains, the Italys, the Portugals, the Greeks that are really dragging the whole system down, and a whole lot of money's getting pumped into there. So, but there's also political pressures going on there with the Germans trying to make sure that they can get the power and things. So there's going to be leaks, but it is a big issue, and there is potentially some upside from splitting those out, but someone's going to have to take a big haircut, and I don't think that's going to happen.
Well, we talked about it last year that bondholders really need to take a haircut. If it's 70 cents on a dollar or whatever it is that they end up taking a haircut on, so that the debt levels in Greece can get down to more manageable levels. When they did that refinance package last year, France and Germany were very much against the bondholders taking a haircut, because French and German banks were the major people who held these bonds. So they were trying to, paper over the cracks, I guess. And the same thing with Ireland. German and French banks were some of the biggest holders of Irish debt. So they want, at the moment, all the pain has been inflicted upon, Joe Blow in the street. The bondholders haven't been affected yet. And so you share the pain around. I mean, Ireland's taken all the pain from the banking crisis because of their stupid bank guarantee. Iceland just said, hey, we're not paying, so what?
Yeah, when we're talking about a haircut, we're not talking about this sort of haircut.
I want to talk to you about that haircut.
It's sort of, like I give you give me $100, and sorry, Genevieve,
65 cents back.
I can't give you it back, so that's what we're talking about, and that's what a lot of investors are facing in Europe at the moment.
Talking about that kind of haircut over in the United States now, $1 trillion plus deficits. They've raised their debt ceiling. What's the latest there?
It's just a moving target. There'll be a lot of posturing, but a deal will get done just before the deadline. The economy will pick up. I mean, it's posturing, and people are starting to position themselves for next year's election.
Okay, let's go to China now. Apparently, they've banned diesel exports, Jeff.
Yeah, I saw that the other day. I wasn't exactly sure why they were banning diesel exports, but Chinese economy continues to boom. I think we're looking at economic growth of about 9.7% this year. So not sure why they were, banning diesel exports. It was interesting to see that China is the largest importer of US farm exports. They take 20% of the US farm market, and US agricultural exports are up 27% in the last 6 months. So again, cotton, wheat, corn, soybean. US is still doing pretty well in some sectors. Interesting when you talk about Europe, like how the northern part's doing well and the southern part's dragging it down. We tend not to talk about the United States in the same terms because, again, it's a union of 50 states, and within that there are winners and losers, and so it's exactly the same as Europe. I can't actually see the euro breaking up, personally.
We've talked about what's happening with the flooding in the Mississippi, of course. Over in Europe, Jeff, grain farmers are really worried. They're having incredible droughts. What do you hear there?
Well, I was talking to a friend of mine in Sweden the other day, and they've had some really hot, sunny weather, way early, late April, early May, record high temperatures, which isn't great at the start of a growing season to suddenly almost get kind of drought conditions. So they're probably praying for rain, I would think.
Yeah, and when you look at the US, and there's parts of it that are, the Mississippi's obviously been on flood, but then you look at some of the Texas plains and that sort of thing, they're in some pretty
incredibly dry.
Very, very
not
dry.
far apart either.
That's right. And then you look and start. I've read a few reports. I went back and had a little report from the beginning of January, and that report said, look, the wheat situation, the corn situation in the US is very, very tight at the moment. Only need to get a difficult summer coming out where it could be dry, yields are down, to really have a big impact on the market. And we're starting actually to see that now because...
what are you seeing? Tell me.
Well, the report sort of indicated that data over the past 800 years suggests that there's a drought in some of the big growing areas of the US about every 20 to 25 years. And right now we haven't had the US hasn't had a drought for about 25 years. So you kind of wonder...
Wow, they're due.
Stats are not looking good. And I'm not sort of saying it's going to happen yet, but we're just starting to get to the point where there's a few risks. If that happens, then commodities could just explode.
So what's it mean for farmers down in the Australasian region?
Well, I think if it does happen, then we're going to see grain prices really spike higher. Already, we are starting to see that beef markets, in particular, or the beef herd, is starting to be liquidated a bit because they just can't feed the cows, they can't feed the cattle, so they're liquidating that stock. And the rebuilding phase is not going to happen now. It's probably not going to happen for the next year or two, which is going to be a good thing for livestock markets, I think, over the next 2 to 3 years.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you very much. Stay with us. We'll come back. Coming up after the break, future-proof, what our experts will be hot on the trail assessing over the next 7 days. Where are they headed? Go along for the ride. But first, a question for you in our Farmers' Facts and Figures quiz. How much have overall food prices climbed in the past 12 months? The answer when we come back. Stay with us. Welcome back to Money Talks. Just before the break, we asked you, how much have overall food prices climbed in the past 12 months? The answer, New Zealand food prices are up 6.1%, the highest annual increase since July 2009. And now it's time for Future Proof. What's coming up that our experts will be watching? Jeff, you have your eye on the Kiwi Saver situation.
Well, they pretty much got announced last week that they're going to adjust the matching tax credit. So personal preference was, once KiwiSaver came in, obviously the $1,000 kickstart stays. There's going to be some adjustment to the matching tax credit, but the amount of savings will be exactly the same. It's coming out of the employer and the employee's pocket rather than as a tax refund.
Do you still think it's a good deal? Would you recommend people get involved?
Yeah, I do. And I mean, the government needs to put... Well, what needs to happen is you need a bipartisan agreement on savings, because we've kind of lost the last 20 years arguing back and forth about, do we have a savings problem? The government needs to take the lead on developing KiwiSaver, and what the market doesn't want are lots and lots of tweaking or changings. It just destabilises potential investors. I heard a couple of young guys on the ferry the other day in their mid-20s, and they both said after they'd heard about the potential changes is that they weren't going to bother with KiwiSaver because some government 20 years, 30 years down the track is going to change the rules. That's exactly the wrong kind of message that we want to send to them.
So how do the Australians get around it? How do the Canadians get around it?
Well, I mean, Australia started, I think it was 3% originally back in 1991, then it moved to 5%, now it's 9%. They're talking about 12%. And that's an employer contribution, not an employee contribution. It's pretty much a tax on the employer that just gets put in the account. $1.2 trillion later, I mean, it may not be a perfect system, but it's better than what we've got currently. The government needs to take the lead on cutting debt and, using as a good example. Okay.
James, what are you keeping an eye on?
Well, I think we can't really avoid the budget tomorrow. That's going to be the big one, and most of the market's going to be watching it. And to be honest, all Kiwis should be watching it because it's going to have an effect on what they do day to day. So that's going to be the biggest effect, and it'll be interesting to see what impact that might have on, say, the currency, depending on what the outcome is.
What do you think the market is saying to itself today about how John Key and the boys and the girls have handled the economy so far?
That's a good question, to be honest. I think there's probably a perception in the business world. There's been some changes, and they haven't come up to some of the issues as much as they would have liked. And now we're starting to see other competitors coming into the political framework, the Don Brashes, the Acts, that sort of thing. So, and they're pushing some of these buttons. They're pushing the buttons that haven't really been necessarily pushed over the past couple of years. But there's been a lot of curveballs thrown at the government, and some really difficult decisions that have been made. And one of the key things is keeping the ratings agencies at bay, and I think we'll see that tomorrow.
Well, obviously, John Key would have run this by the ratings agencies before he unleashes it tomorrow. Is it going to be enough, Jeff?
We'll find out after tomorrow. But I mean, government knows, what it needs to do. A couple of years ago, there were Americans telling the Europeans, how they should run their economies and how they could fix the problems. And the European finance minister said, we know how to fix the problem. We just don't know how to get re-elected afterwards. So that's kind of part of the issue now. They know that they need to cut back welfare payments and a whole bunch of other stuff. But doing it in a recession right now is not going to help. So softly. And I guess the point you're making is the Business Roundtable and other people are saying it's too soft. You know, we need to be harder on some of these issues.
Yeah, it hasn't been tough enough. What's he waiting for? He's waiting for the election. What are we, idiots? We don't know this? What's going to happen after the election? Do you think the New Zealand public is really taking that on board as they go to tick the ballot?
Well, some of them will, the people that really follow it, the people that really understand the issues, and you know, then they probably potentially will be. But there's going to be a large proportion that don't necessarily follow this and don't think that there are issues out there. So they won't be so responsible, I guess, looking into it as much.
All right. Well, I'm going to rely on guys like you to explain it, so that we are intelligent voters. Thank you so much. Thanks to my guests, ASB rural economist James Shortall and Jeff Matthews, Senior Financial Advisor for Spicers. We love to hear your feedback, so be sure to check out the website. Meantime, remember, no matter how crazy your latest idea might seem, if you believe in yourself, you might just be amazed who'll play along with you.
Patty cake, baker's man. Bake me a cake as fast as you can.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, what was that? Stop. Stop.
It's payback,
Stop.
baby.
Stop.
Payback.
Just stop right now.
Come on, Nate, no.
Stop right now.
Come on.
We
Patty
don't
cake.
hit.
Let's go.
We
Patty
oh,
cake.
dude, I'm not gonna do it
All
if you hit me again.
Okay.
Just stop.
Patty cake then.
Just
Patty
stop.
cake.
No.
Patty cake.
One
Come
more
on,
time?
Let's go.
All right.
Come on.
Ready?
Come on, let's go.
You ready? Patty cake, baker's man. Bake me a cake as.
Hey,
dude,
will you
get-
quit? You're
getting
soft.
off- Whoa!
I'm tired of you quitting
Stop.
like that.
Dude, I'm done.
Keep the faith. See you next time.